Good evening, mate. Today I am going to discuss about a game I played against hello08, which has a lower rating than me, finally, since I've gone back to 1642 rating. But that's not the point of this game. The point is to learn from your mistakes and, of course, to sort of discuss a theme or a strategy or a topic that you can sort of learn from. So let's just have a look here. Um, it is a French defense with a Franco-Hiva gambit, number 2, which sounds like a classical thing to me, but I was black and my opponent was white. So hello actually started with e4 and I replied with e6 because I always want to do um, I always want to do the move of bird opening, but if my opponent does e4, which is a king's pawn opening, I I think I'm afraid to do f4 because the queen will easily check me, and I don't want that to happen in the beginning. So let's just start with e6, and then knight goes to f3, normal development, and then f5 there, because I love f5 and since the knight is actually blocking the queen's way, I can sort of do this, otherwise it's gonna be scary. Now the queen cannot move, it's blocked by the knight. And what did white do? White actually took it. He took f5 and then I of course took f5 as well using the pawn. And bishop goes to e2 there. It's actually a pretty passive move. Probably is trying to castle straight away to the king side, and I believe it's actually good for me because I can sort of utilize this passive and non-aggressive, non-attacking move to move my knight to f6. And from then on I can sort of build a counter-attack or build up a position to sort of get it back. So the king castles here and bishop goes to d6, just trying to get the bishop out. And of course it's actually eyeing at the pawn at h2 there. It's pretty interesting to do this early in the game in the beginning. And then of course knight goes to d4, was moved by white, trying to attack the pawn there at f5. And of course I don't want to let this pawn to be taken. I just move it forward. I move it to f4, and actually it's I believe it's a good move because I can sort of push it forward later on after I castle kingside. Let's just have a look what's the idea of a white attack here. So knight goes to c3 there, of course it's good, it's trying to build up the knight and everything, but it's not really hyper modern because it's putting the knight in front of a lot of pawns there, and we can see that the pawn at d and the pawn at c is actually behind the major pieces, which is not the idea of hypermodern attack, which I like a lot, but it's okay. You can do a lot of style, and hypermodern is just one of the way, and I suppose I can sort of respect that. And here I can just move c5. c5 here is actually done to threat the knight there, and the knight is actually suggested to move to f5, but it didn't. Of course, if knight goes to f5 there, I have to move my bishop because it is actually being threatened, and it has limited space either here or actually here, and it's gonna be annoying for me because my queen is blocked and something like that, but didn't do that. So what happened here? I moved my king to castle. Sorry, before that. So the knight was threatened, it just moved back to f3, which is in front of the king, natural defending position and that sort of thing. And here I've got an idea to sort of castle, because by castling I can have a quite advanced pawn there at in front of the knight, which is f4, and from that on it's actually pretty strong. Because if it's pretty it can sort of support f4, and from then on it's actually pretty good. So bishop goes to c4, check, and of course I just run away from the check, and so far there is no direct threat. But of course, if the pawn at d2 is pushed forward and then the queen goes on, and there will be an immediate threat later on to h7 pawn, which is in front of my king, and I don't want that to happen. Luckily, my knight is still there, which is that f6, trying to defend that. But it's gonna be scary if I cannot defend. So I have to attack as well. So what do I see here? Knight goes to g5. Of course, is trying to build up an attack, probably trying to attack the pawn at h7 as I discussed. I simply move my queen to e8, and the idea here is actually to actually to attack to bring the queen to the diagonal of e8, f7, g6, and h5, which is an interesting I suppose point, because if I am able to do that, it's gonna be good for my attack. It is a mistake according to the engine, but I don't really care, because as simple as when the rook goes to e1, I simply just move my queen to g6 and voila, it's not a problem anymore. And then when the knight goes to f3, probably here we can see that the queen is actually threatening the knight and also the pawn behind it, and of course the king. That's the main idea of this, and I enjoy this doing because it's gonna be a good threat. So the knight goes back to f3, and I think I can move b6 here, because if I move b6, it's going to be a good spot for my my bishop and my white square bishop to be fianchettoed and to attack this pawn. So basically, if my bishop moved to the place where the pawn was, my white square bishop, I simply can put a lot of pressure on this area. And of course, with the advanced pawn of f4, and it can be marched forward as well, and I can sort of try to build an attack for that. So bishop goes to d3 there, trying to annoy my queen. My queen is not really annoyed, just move to h5, and knight goes to e4. I don't know what's trying to do, probably just try to annoy my bishop there, but I simply take using my knight takes e4, and of course bishop takes back because it should be an exchange, otherwise it's gonna be a loss. And I cover this diagonal up with my knight by going to c6. d3 is moved. Finally, it's actually trying to open up some of the major piece, which is bishop at c1, and bishop goes to b7, trying to counter the bishop in the middle. Now of course the idea is still trying to put pressure at g2, c4, which is I'm not sure, ambitious pawn forwarding move or that sort of thing, but I don't think that's the main idea here. Probably maybe it wants to do a fancy move such as queen goes to c2 and then putting the pawn forward and that sort of thing, but I sort of try to focus on my own development. So rook goes to f6 with the idea, of course, with the next move, which is rook goes to h6 behind the queen, and then all of a sudden the pawn at h2 is actually gonna be under fire as well. So well, basically the idea is actually to put pressure towards the king's defense, which are the pawns, and of course any other major pieces such as the bishop and other things. So b3 was moved by the queen here. Now I'm getting the idea, which is I guess black is going to fianchetto its bishop to b2, and it's actually going to threat my rook at f6. So rook goes to h6 here, trying to battery up and put pressure on h2. h3 was moved there. h3 is actually I think it's gonna be weakening, I suppose, if I can say, the because simply if you're doing this h3, I can move my rook to f8 and then trying to sort of build up an attack later on. But let's just have a look. Bishop goes to b2, knight goes to a5, which is trying to, of course, challenge the bishop at e4 in the middle of the board. And of course, white took it here, knight takes it back, and all of a sudden there is an exchange bishop, and of course it's not strong anymore to defend knight there. King goes to h2 was moved by white, which is I suppose it's like a wasting move. Because of this move, I simply can move my queen to g4 there, because the pawn at h3 is pinned, and of course the pawn at h3 cannot take my queen because the king is there, and it sort of put more pressure over there, and I can sort of move my rook later on to maybe, I suppose, f5, and then I can move it to h5 maybe, trying to build pressure, or even I can move it to any other square behind the queen maybe later on as it clears out. But let's just have a look here. Bishop goes to e5. I believe this is a very bad idea. It's trying to exchange my pieces. Well, I simply do not care about it. I just move my rook to f5, and king goes to g1, trying to move back, and I think it's a mistake because all of a sudden I can take h3, and then the opponent at g2 cannot take the rook. It's actually pretty strong before, but since you can see that there is a pin there are so many pins going on if the king moves, so the pawn at h is pinned. If king moves to g, the pawn at h can be taken, and then the pawn at g is pinned, and it's gonna be all over. So I think bishop takes d6 just to release the pressure on the diagonal at diagonal, and then I simply take back using my knight, so it's pretty square and fair. And then knight goes to h2, which is a good idea, I suppose, because of course it wants to sort of attack the queen. If you're wondering about so I take this one. So if you're wondering if why does the rook not go there and it's a checkmate, it is not, because of course there's my knight there guarding, so it's pretty cool to have knight there, just occupying the only square that is actually matter, which is e8. So it's pretty good defense somehow. Of course not in the long term, but simply my pawn in front of the king, the pawn in front of the black king can be moved forward as well, just in case anything bad happens. So let's just have a look here. Knight goes to h2, threatening the queen, and of course there's also another threat of the queen at d. And I don't want to exchange my queen here, because simply if I exchange my queen, then I have to move my rook as well, because there's no more pin. I enjoy pinning my opponent because my opponent cannot move anywhere. And of course the idea is actually from here. I sort of want to do some pawn move later on, but let's just have a look. I have to escape my queen. Let's just move my queen to g6 first, and from there we can sort of build on, maybe put the rook in front or something like that. We can arrange to something like that. Okay, so f3 was done here. Do you actually know what happens if f3 is moved? I simply move my queen there, move my queen to g3, because there's no more pawn at f2, which will annoy me. So be very careful with when you are if you are in the position of white and you have so many major pieces like this rook and then this queen and then another rook and probably a pawn that is actually advanced in front of you. You do not sort of want to mess around with your pawn structure in front of king because simply it's vulnerable because of the pins that these major pieces actually are bringing to you, and a simple mistake such as f3 is actually can be punished very heavily. I mean, I simply move my queen to g3 and all of a sudden there is a threat of losing the knight. The knight at h2 is actually under fire at the moment because there is a possibility that it will be taken by the two major pieces eyeing at the knight, and the king cannot defend that. So it's gonna be material loss, and let's have a look. So what happened is knight goes to g4 here, and it says that checkmate is now unavoidable, but it is in 8 move, and I didn't see that because it's in 8 move. I know that I can move my rook there, which is the right move, and then all of a sudden there is a threat of course my rook going to attack. What response should be like this? Rook e8 check, and I simply take it, and of course there's another defense like that, and I can sort of attack like this, like that could happen, and there's suddenly a battery. So this is a cool actually sequence that could have happened, and a nice sort of trying to cover up and something like that. It's actually pretty cool, and yeah, pawn have to go there. It's pretty cool. So it's a checkmate, I suppose, in 8. Yep. So this is the checkmate in 8 move, but it didn't happen. Instead, when the knight was moved there, I simply moved my pawn there, and it's actually the idea of losing the first checkmate sequence, but trying to attack the knight, of course, and it has to sort of come back and makes it a bit annoyed or that sort of thing. And of course it's putting a safety factor as well because my king can move forward, but actually I shouldn't be worried about that because it's actually very safe at the moment with the knight, with my knight at d6 actually eyeing e8 at the moment, so it's very good. So but I did move this anyway because I'm sort of thinking of the safety as well, but it's actually blocking the other move, which is the best move, which is going there and then creating a battery and then all that sort of threat sort of thing. So it didn't happen. So this sort of thing didn't happen at all, which could be pretty cool. But instead, what happened was I moved my pawn there, and then of course queen goes to e2, now threatening me with the check or something like that. I'm not really scared because I am pretty safe in fighting counterattack basically. But then I just take this one using h takes g4, and there is another sequence of checkmate that is unavoidable. F takes g4, and then there you go. F3 is move here. So I sort of still think of material, but this one is actually pretty scary if you think about it. Like f3 is actually threatening both this pawn to be taken and then this queen at the same time. So it's actually pretty major. The queen runs away to f1, and then it's actually a mate in 2. Why is it a mate in 2? Because I simply move this one, check, and when the queen takes, I just take this one, and it's a checkmate. So that would happen. So probably if you sort of think about it, it's actually not really a lot of. It's actually a slow and subtle game where there are a lot of exchanging in pieces, but the concept that I want to sort of introduce to you here is actually the idea of um, which position is actually better, and the answer to that question is actually black's position. Black's got better positioning, and actually is leading to a lot of problem for white because it starts with the unnecessary move of the king, I suppose, which is going here, and then queen slowly is going forward, and then exchanging pieces. That didn't happen. Sorry. So the king is moving, sort of trying to. Okay, sorry. Let me just start again. So basically, what happened with white? It's actually pretty square and fair, but then because of its defending method that is incorrect, it's wasting actually a lot of tempo and of course materials later on, and which leads to checkmate. So the pawn move here h3 I suppose is a blunder because moving this pawn, uh, well, it's actually not a blunder itself, but by moving this pawn and moving the king itself, it is a blunder because it's weakening the pawn structure, and also by moving the king around in not a good time, it's actually threatening a lot. So this is the first pawn loss, and then afterwards this is um, another mistake, which is moving this pawn. So it's not a good idea to do that, I suppose, for white. I know what is usually attacking and not defending at all, and I believe it's actually good um, to do that, to not attack, to attack, but not to defend. But in case of there are sort of three major pieces in front of you and that sort of thing, you sort of have to defend more, I suppose. And if you're not accurate, I can sort of a lot of punish you because my pieces is already there. So the idea that I can learn and sort of give to you is actually even though you are in the same material or that sort of the same forces, but if you are actually focusing your forces towards your enemy's king, which is what I do here instead of what white does, it is actually more lethal and it's actually creating more pressure, and it's actually giving you more chances to attack and to finish off the game by checkmate instead of just not really focusing on that. So it's a good idea to bring that major pieces or even your pawn together with you, creating harmony on sort of tactics as well, such as spinning. Even you do not deliberately create the tactic, it can happen. And of course, do it carefully and don't miss your opportunity to checkmate quicker. And I suppose that's what I can learn from this game. So thank you for watching and see you later. Bye.